Justin Khoe is a professional YouTuber, podcaster, and church consultant creating content for the spiritually curious. Justin has partnered with numerous organizations, including AllMade, A Better World Canada, Faith Life, and hundreds of churches, colleges, and conferences around the world. By bringing people together from opposing ideologies, religions, and politics, Justin works towards a world where each person has a more established set of beliefs because they have been challenged and explored. Please welcome Justin Khoe.
A recent study by the Unstuck Church Report states that among churches surveyed, in-person attendance is 36% of what it was pre-COVID. As Kerry Newhoff said in his blog, no leader entered 2020 saying, "I hope that we're at 36% of where we are right now by the end of the year." But that's exactly what's happening. If you selected to tune into this presentation, there's a very strong likelihood that I don't have to convince you about the importance of digital missions. And so, I'm not going to even try. Instead, in our time together, I want to paint a few pictures of what digital missions could be. Together, we're going to hear from some digital pioneers and how they approach things like discipleship, community building, and outreach.
I run the Rise and Lead podcast that launched in the fall of 2019 and is currently being downloaded in 90 countries around the world.
I'm an MDiv student at Andrews University right now. And right now I am the director of a podcast called Advent Next. And it's targeted to be kind of like an Adventist TED Talk where we bring on professors and researchers and just professionals and experts in their field to just give people an insight into worlds they may not have otherwise discovered.
I've been a pastor here, an associate pastor for the last 3.5 years. So youth and young adults. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Finished seminary before that and married, 2 fur babies, making it out here.
My whole deal is I sit with people and facilitate the sharing of their life stories. The whole range of cultures and ages, just talking about experiences in people's own voice.
Just bringing in new ideas and fresh perspectives and research to really make people excited about their faith again.
Hey Jesus, what's up? Hey Angel. Hey, did you give the new food item that I created for the humans? Oh yeah, it's the best thing that you've made for the humans. It's this one, right? The Starbucks chai.
Attention is the new currency in our information economy. As a pastor, I am concerned about many of the things that my youth are watching. And so what better way to counteract that by producing meaningful expressions of the gospel that is scripturally consistent and authentic, and it values the other, and it helps build a bridge between us and them.
There's an entire underbelly of pain in the Adventist church. I kind of describe this as an iceberg. If you look at our posts online, if you look at Facebook and social media posts and everything, that's the tip, right? That's the top of the iceberg, the visible part. But my life as a minister, I don't know the best terminology, but my life as a person called to show up for people, really involves a lot of private stuff. I mean, I use the example of I tend to be a person who gay Adventist kids come out to before their parents or before their church or before anybody. They don't have a single trusted Adventist person in their life that they can talk about this with.
Whatever platform you're going to launch, the goal needs to be to add value to the people that you are offering your content to. It's not so you can get a kickback. It's not so you can get speaking gigs or invitation. The goal is for you to help people be better with Jesus, better with their marriage, better with their community, better with their life.
I think what's working really well is just giving people access to information and new information and tools that they can use and perspectives that they can hold when they approach the scriptures. Because, like I said, I think people get stuck sometimes in a fundamentalist understanding of scripture. There's not a lot of nuance sometimes. And we don't know how to navigate the gray area. And we also sometimes don't know how to be relevant to our community, other than knowing that like Jesus is the answer and he is the source of our healing. sometimes breaking that down in practical application and what that really looks like is such a long journey that people sometimes don't have the time to do in a 40-minute sermon once a week.
Now, when you take that sermon, you break it down to a 60-second clip on TikTok or a 10-minute video on YouTube or a 10-second micro clip on Instagram Reels. The potential of that going to so many people than just your immediate audience is pretty crazy.
I think one of the things that's kind of paradigm shifting for a lot of pastors is that it doesn't matter if you read the gospel on a glow tract, or if you hear it from an evangelistic series in a neutral third-party location, or if it comes from a sermon in the church space or from a video on the internet. What matters is the mission, what matters is the message, and where we communicate this message, where we communicate the mission, it really doesn't matter as long as people are there.
Who are the people that you're trying to reach?
I have explicitly stated that I'm a student pastor, I'm a disciple, and a husband. And you would think that would repel them or deter them away from the content. But yet you have this tribe of people who are there.
And how are you going to connect with those people? And there are content platforms for Seventh-day Adventist exclusive audiences. There are content platforms that may be a mix of Christian secular, or there could be content platforms that are just about reaching that person off the street that's never going to step foot into a church.
Most of my followership on TikTok are people who are not Christian, people who are atheists, people who are agnostic, people in the sidelines and the margins, right?
I think I'm connecting with a more artistic mind, people who don't feel like they fit. They're like, I'm not going to be a pastor, or I'm not going to be I'm not going to be a pastor, right? Or an elder or a deacon in my church, but I still love the Lord, and I don't know how he can use my gifts for ministry. And so really helping people who might feel on the fringe feel more included in that work.
If you try to reach everybody, you're going to reach nobody. If you're worried about offending people, you're going to try to hit everybody. And if you try to hit everybody, chances are you're going to hit nobody.
It's kind of a hodgepodge of different people. If you're ministering within like a square mile, you have all types of people with all types of different backgrounds and all types of different interests. And sometimes that doesn't bring a lot of focus to the church. And I think in digital ministries, I can say, I want to focus on this very narrow subculture, right? I want to focus on people who like movie analysis. So I'm going to start a YouTube channel where I'm going to take my perspective and I'm going to now do analysis on film, right? Or whatever it is that you want to do. You can be very targeted in your thoughts about subculture. And I also think that's playing into how I would minister in a local community moving forward. Like, how do we become more targeted in our approach rather than trying to find something that's going to fit everybody, because that's never going to happen.
And I'll just say this, I think a good question when it comes to your niche or your target audience is, ask yourself the question, what breaks your heart? Because often what breaks your heart are the people that you want to reach and love and connect with the most. So for me, with Rise and Lead, what breaks my heart is people, Christian and non-Christian, who don't see the potential that God has put in them. They don't know that greatness is already inside of them. This is not a greatness you order off Amazon. God already put it inside of people.
In the last year, I've made a shift away from content for an audience to content with my audience. As a former evangelist, as a pastor, as a speaker type, we preach to an audience all the time. And this is great. There's a role for this when it comes to internet content. But what I found people really looking for is doing conversations or doing content with people. Instead of talking to church people about what they need to say to, say, the non-Christian or the atheist or the gay or the pagan or the fill in the blank, instead of doing that, I found myself actually getting a lot further when I actually sit down with the very person that I'm trying to reach.
When it comes to what's working and the things that they care about, I think I can boil it down to just one word, and it's meaning. People tend to, especially in my side of TikTok, in my little corner of the world, they tend to gravitate towards meaningful expressions of care, and I try to do that through my chai videos.
It's really clear to the audience that I am a man of faith, that I work for a church organization, but our focus is really helping people grow and lead better. So I would say it doesn't happen every week, but on some weeks, I may get 5 direct messages, usually through Instagram, and it's somebody that says, I just found your podcast and it has given me so much hope in my life.
I think there's a difference between ministry and evangelism, okay? So ministry in its basic sense is practicing the way of Jesus by serving one another without reservation or qualification. It's the calling that every Christian accepts once they have chosen to somehow order their lives according to the way of Jesus. But evangelism is a specific type of ministry where one is explicitly inviting someone to reorient their lives or their desires in the way of Jesus. So that could be through a sermon like we talked about, that could be through a series of social media posts, or even through a program. So put it another way, evangelism is ministry, but not all ministry is evangelism. Evangelism is just one facet of the broader calling of ministry that everybody is called to. And so Paul clarifies this ministry in 2 Corinthians 5:18, and he talks about that once you accept Jesus Christ, you all have a ministry of reconciliation.
It's ministry in the way that Jesus, sitting with the people that he was criticized for, sat with them. I mean, being wholly present, and not just present as someone who's an authority to come in and tell you things, but also as a person who sits and listens. So the ministry of presence, the ministry of listening and being genuinely curious.
So much of what we see coming from the church is dogma and rhetoric. And noticeably absent from it is compassion, is intimacy, is a willingness to be gracious and understanding with people that we disagree with. So much of what we see on the internet right now is divisive, whether that's because of politics or because of religion, but it's so easy to pick a side and to say, if you're not with me, then take a hike. If you're not about what I'm posting, unfollow me right now. And I just can't believe that this is what Jesus was about. Jesus was the guy who crossed aisles. Jesus was the guy who was willing to go hang out with the other. I think one of the best descriptions of Jesus that was ever written about him is that he was a friend of sinners. And when I think about the work that I do, and when I think about what people could know me for, that's something that I aspire to be known as. Someone who's a friend of the quote unquote other, the friend of the sinners. I want to be known as that kind of a person. And when I think about the kind of content that I see people connecting with on a deep soul level, it's exactly this. It's when we're able to recognize the humanity in someone else.
And I'll tell you one cool story. This even blew me away, because you just never know how God's going to work. A lady wrote me and she said, I went for my morning jog, and she said, I was so depressed and hopeless. And she said, I prayed on the jog that I would, find some kind of hope for the day, because she was kind of at the end of her rope, no light at the end of the tunnel. So she's praying as she's jogging. She's scrolling through iTunes or Spotify. My podcast pops up. She listens to an episode as she's jogging. And here's what she told me. She said, I started getting so much hope from the episode. I turned around, went home, and I binge listened to 25 episodes in the same day. And I just, and it's a moment like that where there's nothing else to say but, God, thank you for the opportunity to speak into somebody's life who would never show up in a church.
You need expertise to go viral, right? You might have to be better at editing or presenting stuff or whatever, and put something funny. You need expertise to go viral, but I think you need empathy to build a tribe. You need to understand people. You need to lead with empathy and not orthodoxy, especially if you want to connect with the other.
I'd say that it's as simple as changing from short-term thinking to long-term thinking. Short-term thinking says, I need 50 people in my church this year or next year or whatever. Long-term thinking says, I want my community to know Jesus. I'm going to commit to a life of moving things in a direction that is more Christ-like. I'm going to be with somebody and commit to being in relationship with them for decades without the guarantee of a conversion.
I'm still learning. I haven't got it all figured out, but God is speaking into people through me that I would not have had the chance to connect with because of the podcast. And so when you think about launching a media missions initiative, YouTube, podcasting, whatever it is, there is a substantial amount of work on the front end if you want to do it really well. And I don't want to sugarcoat. It is a lot of work and there's a lot of little details, but I will say this, it is doable. If I could do it, it is doable for anybody.
We are arguably at probably one of the biggest media shifts in the history of communication shifts in the history of mankind. And so what COVID has done is exacerbated it by forcing everybody to take their stuff online. So right now, more than any other time in Earth's history, I would even say, if you have a message, if you have a ministry, if you have anything that you want to communicate and if you want to make an impact in the world, probably the best way to do that, best way to start is to actually take your message onto social media.
Also looking at digital media, not as necessarily a place to, just display kind of your sermons or things like that, but how do you begin to really have a community and let people see what the walk of faith is like, not just what church looks like on, a Saturday or a Sunday morning or whichever, but what it looks like when you're struggling and how you're getting through the loneliness of COVID or the fact that you're moving or the fact that you're in transition with your jobs. Like, these are things that are relatable and I'm working on doing, right? So I'm working to do that for my own personal channel. And I think that's, we can use that space well. And if we use it well, we're going to be effective as long as we all work together.
Anybody that says, I don't have the time to do what God is putting on my heart, I think they're not being fully honest, because most of us, we have the time. We're just not managing our time well. If God put it on your heart, look at the time it's going to take and know that investing that time to add value to other people is going to be worth that investment.
And this is easier to do now because of coronavirus. Now we can't meet in person. So what does this mean? When a health pandemic, when fear of meeting in person can suddenly bring the church to a halt, I think it's kind of an indictment on what we've built church up to be so far. The church should not be handicapped when it comes to this. In fact, Jesus promised us that the gates of hell would not prevail against anything else. And so if we truly understand what the church is, we should be able to march forward no matter the circumstance. And I think right now, social media ministry is one of the major ways that we can progress and move forward and reach the world.
There are 8 billion people on the planet. And if every person who is an Adventist, there's 20 million in the world, if every Adventist had, I think, 400 non-Adventist friends on Facebook or Instagram that they interacted with, we would reach the whole world. And so sometimes it's not about one person doing so much and having the 20 million followers. Sometimes it's about every person doing their part.
I think what we need is people with courage who are just going to follow the dream that God places on them. I don't know what the cost will look like in order to do that. I know that for me, pursuing the dream that God placed on my heart came with a very real cost. But when I look back and I see God like pulling me, just like trying to give me the courage that I needed to trust him, I get why people are in paralysis, but also I know what happens on the other side, that if you pursue it, that God's gonna blow your mind. And so what I'm hoping from EC3 is that we move from inspiration and we go towards action. Because the world needs action today. It needs men and women of courage who are going to do what God has called them to do and to be who God has called them to be.